Good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Sunday, 13th July 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. Israel's military actions in Gaza have resulted in a death toll exceeding 58,000, according to the Gaza Health Ministry, with women and children comprising over half of the casualties. Recent Israeli airstrikes have hit various locations within Gaza, including a market and a water collection point. A strike on a water collection point resulted in at least 10 deaths, including 6 children. Another strike killed 9 people, and 31 were shot dead near an aid distribution site. The Israeli military attributed one incident, a missile strike that killed children collecting water in central Gaza, to a technical malfunction, claiming the munition landed dozens of meters from its intended target. However, Gaza health officials reported that the strike on the water collection point caused at least 30 deaths, including 6 children. Civilian deaths continue to mount as Israeli forces reportedly attacked Palestinians attempting to collect water. In the West Bank, funerals were held for 2 men killed by Israeli settlers, amidst reports that 9 Palestinians, including 1 child, were killed this week by Israeli settlers and forces. Former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert has criticized Israel's proposed humanitarian city in Rafah, denouncing it as a concentration camp and an act of ethnic cleansing. Israel is considering moving Gazans into a closed zone during a potential ceasefire, which is currently under negotiation in Qatar. Israeli columnist Gideon Levy argues that Israel lacks a coherent strategy for Gaza beyond ongoing death and destruction. Some analysts suggest that the Abraham Accords signed in 2020 focused on diplomacy and commerce, but failed to address the Palestinian issue or bring lasting peace. China considers Tibet-related issues a significant obstacle in its relationship with India, a point emphasized by a Chinese embassy spokesperson in New Delhi before Indian Foreign Minister Jaishankar's visit, despite recent efforts to improve bilateral relations. This is further complicated by disagreements over the Dalai Lama's succession, which threatens to strain the improving relationship between the 2 countries, though it is not expected to completely derail the Thaw. China and Japan have traded accusations following close encounters between their warplanes, with China alleging repeated entries into its air defense identification zone, while the Defense Ministry accuses Japan of harassment related to a recent encounter with an ASDF spy plane. China's relationship with Australia is also being tested as Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's visit will assess the balance between economic interests and strategic resolve, especially considering Australia's increasing security cooperation with the Philippines. Experts are analyzing how US-China ties might evolve under a potential second Trump administration amid ongoing trade tensions. Professor Zheng Yongnian suggests that Chinese think tanks should concentrate on the nation's specific conditions and incorporate Chinese characteristics to better project the country's soft power to enhance its global influence. China's exports grew by 5.8% in June, exceeding market forecasts due to exporters capitalizing on a 90-day tariff truce. Meituan, a major on-demand delivery platform, reported a record 150 million daily orders amidst competition with JD.com and Alibaba. Luxury hotels in China are adapting to changing consumer preferences by selling street food to sustain their businesses. China has achieved a uranium mining breakthrough, unlocking complex sandstone deposits to boost its green transition and energy security through its largest natural uranium project. Regarding social issues, the central government has intervened in a provincial investigation to expand the probe into a kindergarten lead poisoning scandal. A government-affiliated kindergarten in northeastern China, once exclusively for children of officials, is now broadening its enrollment base due to the country's declining birth rate. Meanwhile, in India, a study suggests that China's large dam project on the Tibetan plateau may worsen floods or cause water shortages during dry seasons, with potential water crisis implications for India. The relationship between China and India is also strained by disagreements over the Dalai Lama's succession, which threatens to undermine the improving relationship between the two countries. Turning to Australia, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's upcoming visit to China will test the nation's ability to balance its economic interests with its strategic resolve, particularly in light of its growing security ties with the Philippines. In the Philippines, the country is strengthening its security ties with Australia amidst shifting power dynamics in the region. A Filipino documentary highlighting the struggles in the South China Sea received an award at the Dock Edge Festival in New Zealand, despite pressure from China to cancel its screening. Finally, Chinese swimmers underwent the most doping tests ahead of the World Aquatics Championships, averaging 8.8 tests per swimmer since January 1. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has suspended Police Minister Senzo Mchunu amid serious allegations. These accusations involve collusion with criminal syndicates and interference in sensitive investigations. Eros Kashalia has been appointed as the acting minister during the investigation. A formal commission has been established to investigate the claims against Mchunu, including his alleged protection of individuals linked to criminal organizations. In related news, US aid cuts have brought HIV vaccine research to a halt, impacting global efforts. These cuts stem in part from claims made by former US President Trump about the targeting of the white Afrikaner minority. Japan is facing a delicate situation as the US seeks clarity on its potential involvement in a Taiwan conflict, a request that has raised eyebrows given the US's official stance of strategic ambiguity. Policies regarding foreigners are also becoming a key issue in Japan, leading up to the July 20 House of Councillors election, with smaller conservative parties gaining traction. Commemorating the third anniversary of Shinzo Abe's assassination, a sense of longing for the former prime minister is growing amidst the current political uncertainties. Internationally, Japan's emperor and empress paid tribute to Japanese individuals who died in Mongolia following World War II, reinforcing the bilateral relationship. The Japan International Cooperation Agency is preparing to issue around $823 billion in bonds to support infrastructure, education, and development initiatives across Africa. On the domestic front, new regulations are in place requiring companies to safeguard employees from heat stroke. Tourists in Japan can now utilize telemedicine services before contacting emergency services when facing medical issues. The Osaka World Exposition reached its 10 millionth visitor, signifying the event's halfway mark. In consumer news, a new energy drink has been introduced to pair with yakisoba, a well-known instant noodle brand. A Taiwanese rocket planned for Japan's first foreign launch experienced a failure shortly after launch because of an unstable trajectory. Turning to the European Union, the EU is planning to intensify engagement with nations impacted by US tariffs, including Japan, as discussions with the US encounter difficulties. Lastly, the Moomin series, commemorating its 80th anniversary, remains widely popular in Japan. Cameroon is seeing its 92-year-old President Paul Biya, in power since 1982, seek an eighth term, despite worries about his health and the nation's political climate. Turning to France, President Emmanuel Macron revealed plans to double the annual defense budget from its 2017 level to €64 billion by 2027. Macron stressed the need for France to be feared in this world, anticipating a future with potentially less reliance on the United States. Ambassador Pierre-André Imbert noted repaired defense ties with Australia after the submarine deal issues. Political parties in New Caledonia struck a historic deal in France concerning the French Pacific Territories' future political structure. Gisèle Pellicot received France's highest civilian honor for a landmark case that reformed rape laws after she testified about enduring a decade of sexual abuse. In a separate endeavor, French maritime enthusiasts are working to secure funds to preserve the replica of l'Hermione, an 18th-century warship representing France's aid to American independence. Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is currently in China to foster stronger trade ties, engaging with Shanghai Party Secretary Chen Jining and preparing for meetings with President Xi Jinping, Premier Li Qiang, and Chairman Zhao Leji. Despite reported pressure from the Pentagon, Defense Industry Minister Pat Conroy and Prime Minister Albanese have reaffirmed Australia's commitment to strategic ambiguity, clarifying that Australia will not pre-commit troops to a potential conflict with China over Taiwan. Treasurer Jim Chalmers has reiterated the Labour government's pledge to construct 1.2 million new homes by 2030, even with the department warning indicating that current policies may not be sufficient to meet this target. In Sydney, authorities are investigating a suspicious fire at a play-to-learn childcare centre in Castle Hill, occurring shortly after a comparable incident at a different centre. Lawyers representing Hannah Thomas, a former Greens candidate, alleged she was punched in the face by a police officer during a pro-Palestine demonstration, causing a severe eye injury, and she plans to file a lawsuit against the state of NSWL. Ukraine is recalibrating its approach to the conflict with Russia, acknowledging the unlikelihood of a ceasefire under the current circumstances. President Putin's lack of interest in de-escalation has prompted Kyiv to explore revised military and diplomatic strategies. The Security Service of Ukraine, SPU, reports eliminating members of Russia's Federal Security Service, FSB, allegedly involved in the assassination of Colonel Ivan Voronich in Kyiv. While earlier reports indicated a plan for North Korea to deploy 30,000 soldiers to aid Russia, Ukraine asserts that North Korea will instead dispatch 6,000 personnel for reconstruction projects. Turning to the United Kingdom, King Charles III has planned a state visit for President Trump in September. The timing coincides with the UK Parliament's recess, thereby precluding President Trump from addressing the House of Commons. Shifts are noticeable in the UK's economic landscape. Sales of country houses valued above £750,000 sterling saw a 7% rise in June compared to the previous year, potentially indicating a market recovery driven by reduced prices. Simultaneously, the number of individuals seeking employment in the UK has surged at its fastest pace since the COVID-19 pandemic, reflecting business anxieties about tax increases and the overall economic forecast. United States President Trump is considering imposing 30% tariffs on goods from the EU and Mexico if trade deal offers don't improve. He has also threatened these entities with tariffs of 30% in August. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem clarified that President Trump seeks to remake FEMA to better assist states during disasters, not eliminate it. Amid escalating tensions with Russian President Vladimir Putin, the U.S. will send Patriot missiles to Ukraine. The U.S. aid cuts have resulted in the cessation of HIV vaccine research in South Africa, with anticipated global ramifications. In CNMI and Guam, groups are seeking a 45-day extension for public input on a U.S. military proposal regarding joint military exercises. US Rep. Debbie Wasserman characterized a new migrant detention center in Florida's Everglades as a brutal alligator Alcatraz. Israel-occupied West Bank saw the tragic death of a U.S. citizen at the hands of Israeli settlers in the occupied West Bank, prompting calls for a thorough investigation. Austria witnessed a violent incident south of Vienna, where police reported that a shooter killed a man and seriously wounded a woman before taking his own life. Germany is preparing for more talks on U.S. tariffs, according to Jürgen Hart. The EU seeks dependable trade allies due to tariffs initiated by former President Trump. These tariffs significantly affect German industries, including Volkswagen's Zwickau plant. The highest court will soon decide on Berlin's responsibilities related to a U.S. Air Force base. Law enforcement confiscated around 300 kilos of amphetamine from a grocery store in eastern Germany. Two prominent German medical scientists, Roland Ailes and Irina Lehmann, have accepted full-time positions at Fudan University in Shanghai, where they will concentrate on AI's application in medicine. India is strengthening its global military ties through participation in exercise Talisman, Sabre in Australia, a multinational drill involving 19 nations and over 35,000 personnel. Meanwhile, internal linguistic dynamics see Prime Minister Modi's push for greater Hindi usage facing resistance from states wary of cultural homogenization. Investigations continue into the Air India crash, with families of the victims demanding greater transparency after a preliminary report suggested fuel switches were cut off post-takeoff. Furthermore, the rise of remote work is influencing the experiences of Indian professionals in Japan, impacting their perceptions of life, family, and identity in a post-pandemic world. Nigeria mourns the loss of former President Muhammadu Buhari, who passed away in London at the age of 82 after battling a long illness. Buhari served as Nigeria's president from 2015 to 2023, and previously as a military head of state. Notably, he was the first Nigerian to unseat a sitting president through democratic elections. He campaigned on platforms of order and discipline, and won elections in 2015 and 2019. While he pledged to combat corruption and terrorism, achieving these objectives proved challenging during his tenure. Italy's Prime Minister Meloni voiced apprehension regarding a possible trade war within the West. This follows President Trump's announcement of 30% tariffs targeting EU and Mexican goods. In a celebratory moment for Italian sports, Jannik Sinner clinched his inaugural Wimbledon title. Sinner is the first Italian ever to win the tournament. He triumphed over defending champion Carlos Alcaraz in a 4-set match with scores of 4-6, 6-4, 6-4, 6-4. Russia and China are in talks about the Ukraine conflict and their respective relationships with the United States. The discussions come as Russia's war on Ukraine enters its 1.236 day. Former President Trump plans a major statement on Russia, signaling growing unease with U.S. efforts to mediate an end to the war. Fiji is facing criticism regarding the alleged rise in attacks targeting the Indo-Fijian community, with accusations leveled against the government for its perceived lack of action. In other news, Fiji secured a 29-14 victory against Scotland in a rugby match held at the National Stadium in Suva. Coach Mick Byrne lauded the team's performance, and a former Fiji captain voiced his enthusiasm for the inclusion of his son, as well as the son of a former teammate, in the national squad. Australia's anti-Semitism envoy Gillian Segal has refuted claims of influencing her husband's company's donation to Advance, a conservative group known for its criticism of pro-Palestine demonstrations and the Labour government. Turning to the Middle East, a United Nations summit dedicated to fostering a two-state solution for Palestine and Israel has been postponed until late July. The potential absence of French President Emmanuel Macron from the summit could undermine efforts to secure broad international support for Palestinian statehood. The European Union has forged a political agreement with Indonesia to push forward a comprehensive economic partnership agreement, CEPA. This agreement aims to unlock new opportunities across key industries. Agriculture and the automotive sector are expected to particularly benefit from the partnership. New Zealand's South Island is grappling with renewed flooding and landslides after days of heavy rainfall. Simultaneously, the nation's government is pushing to double the international education sector to N$7 2034. They plan to achieve this through relaxed regulations designed to attract more international students. Turning to Australia, the Reserve Bank of Australia, RBA, kept the cash rate unchanged at 4.35%. This decision marks the fifth consecutive meeting with no rate hike. The RBA cited progress in lowering inflation, but remains wary of persistent price pressures. Meanwhile, in Japan, the government approved a plan to release treated radioactive water from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant into the ocean. The release is scheduled to begin on August 24th, prompting strong opposition from neighboring countries and local fishing communities. The government insists the water meets international safety standards. Shifting focus to South Korea, President Yoon Suk-yeol granted special pardons to numerous business leaders. These pardons are intended to boost the economy by encouraging investment and job creation. Among those pardoned were executives from major conglomerates. In Bihar, India, the Election Commission of India, ESC, identified voters originating from Nepal, Bangladesh, and Myanmar during a special intensive revision. Teyashwi, the opposition leader in Bihar, criticized this finding, suggesting potential data manipulation. Yemen's Houthi rebels sank a ship in the Red Sea. This act resulted in the presumed death of at least 4 crew members, while 11 remain missing. A subsequent search operation managed to rescue 10 individuals before concluding. Bangladesh is grappling with the aftermath of a brutal lynching, as police have taken 7 individuals into custody following the death of a scrap trader. Jahangir Alam Chowdhury, the Home Affairs advisor, has strongly denounced the incident, characterizing it as a tragic and barbaric act that undermines the rule of law. Singapore remains the most expensive city worldwide for high-net-worth individuals, according to the 2025 Julius Baer Global Wealth and Lifestyle Report. Hong Kong secured the 3rd spot in the same report, highlighting the concentration of wealth in Asian financial hubs. France is urging the EU to stand firm in defending its interests. President Emmanuel Macron's call came after President Trump threatened 30% tariffs on EU imports. Pakistan's political landscape sees renewed activity as Imran Khan's PTI intensifies its campaign for his release from jail before their self-imposed August 5 deadline. Shifting focus to India, recent monsoon floods have caused widespread devastation. The floods have impacted several regions, leading to significant displacement and infrastructure damage. Moving across the globe to France, President Macron is facing continued pressure regarding pension reforms. Public discontent persists, despite government efforts to address concerns. In the United States, the Federal Reserve is closely monitoring inflation data. This monitoring informs future interest rate decisions. Mongolia recently hosted Emperor Naruhito and Empress Masako of Japan, with the imperial couple hailing the visit as a significant step in bolstering bilateral relations. In other news from Mongolia, the country is gaining attention from Mongolian Mind-Body Interactive. ME Therapy, a wellness program drawing over 1 million Chinese patients seeking treatments for diverse ailments. Canada is grappling with the obsolescence of its Cold War-era radar systems. These systems, once crucial for spotting Soviet bombers, are falling into disrepair. Their decline reflects a changing security landscape and renewed regional militarization. Moving south, the United States recently saw the Supreme Court hear arguments regarding a challenge to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's CFPB funding structure. Opponents argue the CFPB's funding, derived from the Federal Reserve rather than congressional appropriations, is unconstitutional. A ruling against the CFPB could significantly impact its ability to regulate financial institutions and protect consumers. Across the Atlantic, the United Kingdom's economy is showing signs of resilience despite earlier predictions of a recession. Recent data indicates a slight growth in GDP, driven primarily by the service sector. However, inflation remains a concern, prompting ongoing debate about the Bank of England's monetary policy. Meanwhile, in France, President Emmanuel Macron is facing renewed protests over pension reforms. Demonstrators are demanding the reversal of the law that raised the retirement age. The ongoing unrest poses a significant challenge to Macron's authority and his broader reform agenda. Windhelming. Turning to Germany, the government is debating a new package of measures aimed at stimulating economic growth. The proposals include tax cuts for businesses and investments in renewable energy. The goal is to boost competitiveness and address concerns about Germany's slowing economy. In Russia, President Vladimir Putin has signed a law revoking ratification of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, Thaw. This move raises concerns about a potential resumption of nuclear weapons testing. International organizations have condemned the decision, warning of its destabilizing effects on global security. Shifting focus to China, the government is implementing new regulations to control the export of certain technologies. These restrictions are aimed at protecting national security and maintaining a competitive advantage in key sectors. The measures are expected to impact global supply chains and international trade relations. India is experiencing a surge in investments in its renewable energy sector. The government's ambitious targets for clean energy production are attracting significant foreign capital. This growth is contributing to India's efforts to reduce its reliance on fossil fuels. Australia is facing increasing pressure to address climate change. Recent extreme weather events, including floods and wildfires, have intensified calls for stronger climate action. The government is considering new policies to reduce emissions and promote sustainable development. In the United States, a farm worker's death following an immigration raid in California has spurred his family to launch a GoFundMe campaign. The funds are intended to support his relatives residing in Mexico. Brazil's Foreign Minister Mauro Vieira recently addressed concerns that the BRICS economic alliance is anti-West, arguing instead for global governance reforms that better reflect current global dynamics. In related news, National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett defended the United States' newly imposed 50% tariff against Brazilian imports, citing economic justifications. Iran faced a tense situation as presidential candidate Masoud Pezeshkian survived an assassination attempt in June, heightening political tensions. Further details emerged concerning the Israeli attack, raising questions about regional security. The nation's considerable regional influence is now under increased scrutiny. This comes as its internal state shows signs of weakening, fueling concerns about the future stability of the broader Middle East. Asia is seeing nations actively seeking new trade partners. This is to mitigate the impact of tariffs imposed by the United States. The Philippines is at risk of being drawn into the rivalry between the United States and China, given the increasing protectionist policies of the U.S. Thailand's destination, Thailand Visa, DTV program has attracted digital nomads. Bangkok is popular due to affordable healthcare, infrastructure, and lifestyle. Malaysia is seeing rising support for conservative Islamic policies, especially among younger Malay voters. Cambodia is celebrating UNESCO's recognition of Khmer Rouge sites as places of peace and reflection. This is the country's 5th World Heritage listing. Azerbaijan is repositioning itself as a significant player in Eurasia. It is reshaping relationships with neighboring countries after the 2023 seizure of Nagorno-Karabakh Syria's Latakia province saw wildfires brought under control after 10 days. Firefighting teams from Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon, Qatar, and Iraq collaborated. Chile is experiencing a decline in birth rates, offering insights into future trends for countries. Like the U.S., Ecuador is offering a $100,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of a lawmaker accused of raping a minor. Hungary's oldest library is preserving 100,000 books from a beetle infestation. It is located within a medieval abbey. In Spain, a small but increasing number of women are participating in the bull runs at the San Fermin Festival in Pamplona. 2 Chinese satellites may have docked in geostationary orbit for refueling. The United States has not yet accomplished this feat. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.